はりました。そんじゃま一丁やりますか。
やっぱ戦うの？
やってやるぜ親父の敵。
また行っちゃったよ。
艦長出るぜ。西暦2521。
In Season 1 of Bullet Heaven, we took a look at one of, if not the, finest vertical shooters ever created. It was the first ever perfect score on Bullet Heaven, and for good reason. It sports a deep plot, unique level structure, incredibly fun gameplay, and an astounding presentation. It's no small wonder then that it sported a hefty $200 price tag on the Saturn, and continues to even to this day. To many, Radiant Silvergun is known not only for its legendary gameplay, but also, perhaps even more so, its legendary price. That changed on the 14th of September 2011, when Treasure's finest gem hit the Xbox Live Arcade for a mere $15, not only fully translated, but also in high definition. Now, the Silvergun episode in Season 1 came under fire for not going deep enough into what really makes this game special, though. So now is as good a time as any to revisit this incredible piece of shooting history, and seeing what additions are included in the XBLA remastered version. The two core modes of Radiant Silvergun are the arcade mode and the plot-heavy story mode. While shooting diehards will likely dismiss the story as needless fluff, the overall plot is quite an interesting one and unfolds as you play the game. The arcade mode features a multiple path progression system though, in which you can tackle different stages in different orders, which encourages multiple playthroughs. For the XBLA version, online co-op and score attacks that post to a worldwide leaderboard have also been added. There are even training modes that allow you to practice for a higher score. Now, on the Saturn, the control felt very much like a lucky coincidence. Each of your ship's 6 weapons were mapped to the face buttons of the Saturn pad. On the Xbox 360, however, there is not a standard 6-button configuration. As such, there are 2 weapons mapped onto the LB and RB buttons. This feels quite a bit more obtuse than its Saturn counterpart, especially since one of the most useful weapons you will use is up on the right bumper instead of the traditional button C position. Because of this, the gameplay feels quite a bit unnatural, especially with the soft, inaccurate D-pad the Xbox 360 controller has. In fact, the Xbox 360 controller is my biggest complaint with Radiant Silvergun on XBLA. While it's fantastic for first-person shooting games and modern titles with the need of analog control, a game like Radiant Silvergun begs to be played on a more traditional pad, or perhaps an arcade stick. More on that later. As for the core mechanics of the game, the control itself is responsive and feels right for the amount of action on screen. One of the more interesting facets of the game is the progressive weapon system that gets more powerful as you use them. Getting score chains enhances the experience your weapons will get, leading to a faster level up. Your weapons can be powered up all the way to a level of 33, at which point it's possible to hand an early boss its own ass, grilled to perfection, in less than 5 seconds. While the weapons will reset to 0 for each playthrough of the arcade mode, story mode allows you to save your weapon progress for future playthroughs, though you will have to start from the beginning. Your score will also save in this manner, and while you won't be able to rank in, you will get all of the extends you'd normally have to work towards straight off the bat, in addition to overwhelming firepower, which makes each playthrough a little easier than the last. And while the screen may make Radiant Silvergun look like a bullet hell type shooter, it is in fact much more reserved, and requires a very technical, methodical, and thoughtful approach to get further with the limited lives and continues that you have. Maybe technical is putting it a little too lightly. So, you want a shooting game with a deep scoring system? Well, Radiant Silvergun has you covered. Most players are satisfied with blasting the bejesus out of everything on the screen, and calling it a day. You might get further, but if you want a shot at a high position on the new Xbox Live leaderboards, you're going to have to pay attention to the following crucial points. First up, Color chains. There are 3 colors your opposition will be: red, blue, and yellow. Defeating 3 enemies of the same color will get you a color chain. Now this is the same mechanic that Ikaruga would refine with its own sublime gameplay a few years down the line. But that's another episode, wink wink. Thing is though, is that if you interrupt the color you're chaining, say shooting a blue ship after chaining 21 red ones, then the chain resets and you have to start again. The chain will also reset when you defeat a boss, meaning that if you're just one enemy away from getting the max chain of 100,000 points, then you're back at square one when that boss eats it. Because of the chain interruptions, and because of the huge scores that you can get if you know which colors to focus on, you'll often get a higher score by sticking with only one color than blasting everything on screen. This version of Radiant Silvergun also features the option of changing the chain style to one reminiscent of Ikaruga. Ikaruga style will chain your score based solely on combos of 3 regardless of color. Like Ikaruga, the max chain score is 25,600 instead of 100,000. The next thing is the bosses themselves. There are a metric ton of bosses in Radiant Silvergun, and each one is totally unique from the last. They also have multiple parts that can be blasted off. When you defeat the boss, you will be scored on how completely you killed it dead with deadly death of dying. 100% destroy rate will net you a perfect bonus, which often exceeds 100,000 points. If you simply go for the core, the parts you didn't take out first won't count towards the destroy rate. There are other ways to get your score up to stratospheric heights as well. There are a number of secret score points that will get you 10,000 points or more, if you know how to trigger them. Defeating enemies one color at a time in a matter such as, red, blue, and yellow, will trigger a secret score. You can also hit certain points in the stage with specific weapons to uncover Mary, a small puppy with a huge score boost, which is super handy for score attack mode. There are at least 4 Marys in stage 1 alone. You can even boost your score by grazing up against walls, enemies, and even bullets. If you're within the quote-unquote scoring proximity, you will notice sparks flying off of your ship. This indicates that you're getting a higher score as long as this is happening. The scoring system is likely one of the deepest you'll ever find in any shooter. With so much to take into consideration and so many ways to get a high score, the competitive player will definitely find much more than $15 worth, guaranteed. The presentation of Radiant Silvergun is still just as awesome as it was on the Saturn original. Thankfully, the Japanese voiceovers are still intact, and were mercifully subtitled. The translation is also very faithful. The visuals have a shiny layer of gloss added as well, with soft bloom lighting on the shots and rocket exhausts on both your ship and your enemies. You can also change the resolution to the original Saturn specs as well. The textures, models, and aspect ratio have all remained unchanged, which is great since a 16:9 presentation just isn't really needed at all. You can still very much tell that this is a Saturn game, and what changes are here are very subtle. Purists wouldn't want it any other way. The Hitoshi Sakamoto soundtrack is also here too, though the sound quality seems to be a bit off from the Saturn version, especially Stage 2 in specific. But it's still a very engrossing, epic OST that feels both fresh and familiar, especially to those who have played Final Fantasy Tactics. When it comes straight down to it, the little audio issues here aren't enough to drag down the score in any significant way. Well, I guess it's time for the stack-up, but I think you already know where this is heading, especially if you've seen the original Radiant Silvergun episode. But before we get to that, here are more of the sights and sounds of the amazing Radiant Silvergun.
戦闘データは記録維持。加えて司令部上空にいる高エネルギー物体のデータを分析してくれ。了解。
Just like the Saturn original, you can expect nothing less than a perfect experience with the excellent plot, fantastic gameplay, epic music and sound, and amazing visuals that Radiant Silvergun offers. It also shows that when done right, the Sega Saturn's visuals really hold their own, even after all these years, despite the fairly simple polygon, sprite, scaling, and textures. And it's all made even sweeter by the 1200 Microsoft point price tag. Once again, Radiant Silvergun gets the highest honors on Bullet Heaven. Now, as a side note, I've seen what some people have said on certain forums in regards to the pricing. Honestly, if you think 1200 Microsoft points is too expensive for a game that's worth it even at $200, maybe you don't deserve to play this utter masterpiece. Everyone else has probably already downloaded it, and appreciates just how much they are getting for so very little. Whoa, wait, there's more. Sure, the Xbox 360 pad is pretty terrible at the best of times for precision digital control, but there are still third-party options to be had, such as this. This is the PDP Versus Fighting Pad. It features an ergonomically enhanced contour design, a 6-button microswitch layout, and a nifty 8-way micro arcade-style microswitch thumbstick for just $24.99. The Versus Fighting Pad was originally designed for fighting games such as BlazBlue and Super Street Fighter 4, but actually works remarkably well for shooting games, especially Radiant Silvergun. In the case of Radiant Silvergun, the Versus Fighting Pad's 6-button layout and shoulder buttons have exactly the same weapons mapped to them as Radiant Silvergun on the Saturn, making this a seamless pad for fans of the original to migrate to. In terms of actual design, the Versus Fighting Pad is almost like a hybridized genetic engineering experiment of an Xbox 360 controller, a set of arcade buttons, and a Neo Geo Pocket Color. It may look a bit on the ungainly side, but the shortened right side is very easy to grip while going for the right button you need at the right time. Meanwhile, the extended left side allows for a solid grasp while manipulating the control stick, which, by the way, is not only extremely responsive, but very precise. The start and back buttons are also placed on the top of the controller and easily accessible with your right index finger, yet placed far enough out of the way that you'll never hit it by accident. It's not without its faults though. The micro switches on the controller are very clicky and fairly loud, so you'll definitely hear it when it's being used all the time. And since the control stick is just that, a stick, it'll take a bit of time to reprogram your brain to adjust to the split-second time difference between it and a standard D-pad. In addition, there are no wireless models. While this means that you'll never have to charge it, you're still tethered by a 10-foot wire. Thankfully, it has a breakaway cord as well, just in case your lush of a roommate, or maybe your own drunken self, trips over it. For $24.99, you could do a lot worse, and for fans of the shooting genre, especially Radiant Silvergun, the Versus Fighting Pad should be your very next purchase.